and welcome everybody to this week's Maternity Midwifery Hour. And this is Series 12 and Session 10, and it's the last in this series that you're joining us with. My name's Sue Macdonald, and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening's session. And we have one speaker, and we also have another little feature before Alys speaks, but I'm delighted to be joined by Alys Einion. Have I pronounced that right, Alys?
Yes, you
Your
have.
first name is much easier, Alys. Now, we always do this to our guests, and we always ask them to share a moment of their week with us. And would you be so kind?
I'd be very happy to. Thanks, Sue. And it's lovely to be here again. So the moment that I want to share is just a walk that I did. So I recently moved to Dundee and it's been very busy with a new job. But I went out and did a walk along the riverside. So we're very close to the River Tay, which is very wide. And just across the river, you can see Fife. And we just took a nice walk along the riverside. There's like a promenade, a pathway all along the river. And it was one of those rare days in Dundee where it was sunny and there was actual warmth coming from the sun. And we
Oh,
saw a heron down in the mud flats getting
wow.
its breakfast and tossing a fish up and down before it ate. And it just was one of those moments where you're just in awe of nature. And it was like the city's behind me and there's cars behind me. But at that moment, there was just that heron. It was so beautiful. And it really made my week.
Oh, wow. Alys, that's a lovely, lovely thing to share with us. And thank you so much. And I'm looking at your background and thinking, considering you've recently moved, how neat and tidy it all looks. Now, I'm going to assure my audience here that I'm going to try and sort out this bookshelf that you see week after week, which is a little bit untidy. I'm doing my best to make some tidiness, but it's one of my issues. I can't throw anything away, especially books. Anyway, I'm just going to just go through a little bit of the maternity hour, a little bit of the news feature, and then we'll have this other feature. So I need to welcome everybody to this hour. I think I almost forgot that because I know we've got a lot of people from the UK, but I know we've also got someone from Quebec. I believe that that person's name is Celine. So hello, Celine, and hello everybody else from all over the place. Do put in the chat box where you're from because it's really nice for us actually to know where you're all from because this very much, and I always say this to our guests, feels very much a midwifey chat, midwife to midwife, midwife to student midwife. And it feels a lovely, cozy session. And I hope you're going to find it so for those of you who are new to the maternity and midwifery hour. Now, this started right at the beginning, the maternity hour, I mean, not this session, right at the beginning of the first COVID lockdown, which was in this kind of time. Actually, it was this week, 4 years ago, when I think about it. Very frightening time. And those of you who will remember that, I'm sure everybody will remember it because it was a very strange time, scary time. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were working in such a different way. And suddenly midwives, student midwives, no one in the NHS could get out to study days, conferences, festivals, because they had to deal with the emergency that was COVID. And we wanted to put on something to connect midwives, to connect student midwives. And we came up with the 1 hour session each week, which doesn't sound very much, but I think at the time it was really helpful for people. We certainly had a lot of feedback and we're still here. But at the time, initially, we did a lot about COVID and about the effects on pregnant women and the effect on babies and on the effect on services and what people were doing. And midwives were tremendous. The sort of things they did very quickly to try to make sure that women and babies were cared for in a lovely quality way where they weren't always able to do things face to face, like doing parent crafts on Zoom, for example, or doing antenatal visits or booking on Zoom or Teams, whatever. Immense amount of innovations that came through with midwives. And let me tell you, and those of you who are new to this, everything is recorded. The Maternity and Midwifery Forum record everything, and it's all kept in a wonderful archive by the lovely Matflix. So if you are going to enjoy it tonight. You are going to. You might want to look at some other things. And there's loads and loads of stuff in the archives, and you just need to go to Matflix, and the address is in your resource on your resource sheet, and just have a little look. If you want something a little bit more tailored, we do subscriptions, which are quite cost effective if you're just doing like a project or a dissertation or thesis or whatever, and you get very focused book box sets which you can use, which our lovely Dr. Jenny Hall curates and then adds little bits and pieces extra to just help in reflection. They're really, really excellent, but they're all free to access. Most of the things are free to access, perfect for studying, fantastic if you're doing your revalidation. Those of you midwives are looking revalidation in the face, this is fantastic. And I say that from my heart, having had to do my own and had to sort of update on a few little bits that I needed to update on. So the other thing is, because it's all free, share it. So if you enjoy it tonight or you find it interesting, you will find it interesting, you will find it challenging. There'll be things that are new to you. There'll be things that may be a bit uncomfortable. Share. Maybe make an arrangement to meet with a group of your colleagues, if you're students, maybe have a session in the university, or if you're a midwives in the clinical area, in a quiet time. I know there aren't many quiet times, maybe in a quiet time. Just use it as a chance to have a chat and talk about what you've learned and what you've heard, and share, because we like you to share. Now, as I always do, I'm going to say a big thank you to all of you midwives, student midwives, maternity care support workers, paediatricians, obstetricians, all of you there working in maternity services, looking after women and their babies and families so well. Just look after yourselves as well as you're looking after the mothers and babies. That's all I say, because I know when it's a time of stress, it's easy to just forget your own self and your own needs, and you need to care for yourselves. Get enough rest, not too much chocolate, bit of exercise on the side. And also, I'm going to move on to the news now. Now, of course, it's still Ramadan, so Ramadan Mubarak to our Muslim friends and colleagues and sisters and brothers. I also have to say today, I love this, is the International Day of Happiness. And funnily enough, I've got my favourite calendar, which is the Action for Happiness calendar. And this is also on your resource sheet. Now, today is, and it has these lovely mindful things to do. Every day you have a little exercise, and it's not painful. It's not nasty. They're things that make you just think about yourself mindfully. So today was focused on what makes you and others happy. Now, isn't that a nice thing to be able to do? Because maybe in this time when there's so many horrible things going on in the world, and there are, I'm thinking the world is gone absolutely mad and horrible. There are nice things. There's things like seeing the heron catching the fish. Not too good for the fish, but great for the heron. But there's also, you know, the nature, flowers coming out. The spring is a very hopeful time. So maybe use the little calendar if you'd like it. It's great fun to do. Anyway, so that's that. It's also tomorrow is the International Day for the Elimination of Racism, which is very pertinent to our session this evening. And also is World Down Syndrome Day, which we're going to have a speaker next series talking about Down syndrome. So that's in my mind as well. And today it is the spring equinox. Can't even say the word. First day of spring. And apparently, and I didn't know this, but at 3:06 GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, the sun passes directly over the equator, bringing pretty much equal amounts of day and night on all parts of Earth. Isn't that amazing? I just think that's amazing. Fantastic. There's also, I need to highlight, there's some things that I put on the resource sheet, which include, and I haven't read it yet, but you could beat me to it. This is Birth Outcomes and Experiences Report from AMA Birth Companions. Now, Alice will know all about the AMA Birth Companions because it's a charity that's very much based in Scotland, I think in Glasgow. But they've just done this research and report on experiences of women who are refugees, those seeking asylum, and those with insecure immigration status who access maternity care. And just as a surprise, as all of these reports do, it has highlighted huge disparities for these women. And it's got some really good, because I flicked through it, it's got some really good recommendations for education, practice, and the care that we can provide. So I think it's going to be something we're going to return to next series. Now, and I'm almost on time. I think I am perfect on time. I'm going to just highlight, and it's something that was presented at the last festival, which was the RCM Research Priorities Project. And I'm going to introduce a little clip that's been prepared for us by Jenny Cunningham and Jude Field, who are both research advisors for the Royal College of Midwives, for the RCM. And they just want to highlight this project, which is it's live at the moment, but it will be coming to an end. Now, have you filled it in yet? That's also on your resources sheet. So I'm going to ask our lovely Angelo, who's in the background, making sure everything's working and everything's beautifully recorded. He's going to just play the clip from Jenny and Jude. So cue Angelo. I wanted to say that.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thank you, Sue, very much for giving us the opportunity to speak very briefly before the main event this evening. My name's Jenny Cunningham. I'm together here with my colleague, Dr. Jude Field, and we are both research advisors for the Royal College of Midwives. And we're leading this major project, the Research Prioritisation Project. And we want to tell you a bit about it tonight and to really hopefully kind of engage you in it and encourage you to take part. Our email is there, researchpriorities@rcm.org.uk, so please feel free to get in touch with us at any point.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So here you can see our project timeline, and we're following the James Lind Alliance methods. So that means that our project is made up of 2 surveys, and then we have a workshop, which we think will be in around January 2025. And our report will be made public in May 2025. So it's a big piece of work, as Jenny said. What we really want to talk to you about tonight is to highlight that our first survey is open, and that will be closing as planned on the 7th of April, apart from we've decided, along with our steering group, to extend the deadline for people from the global ethnic majority. And we're giving some extra time here until the 9th of May, which will be after the RCM main conference, to try to address the balance that we often see within research projects, sadly, that we're very keen that the findings that we have are representative of all of the UK communities as best we can, so that everyone has a chance for their voice to be heard. So yeah, 7th of April with the extension till the 9th of May for that first survey.
Thanks, Jude. So here's a QR code. So feel free to, if you're on a laptop or iPad, to use your phones and you can access it directly. If not, if you just do a kind of search or a Google search on RCM Research Priorities, you'll get to our webpage with lots of information on it, including a link to the survey. So access it either way. We want to find out the top 10 priorities for midwifery practice and maternity care research. And the people who can respond to the survey are midwives, midwifery students and MSWs, and those of you on the call will be in those groups. But we also want women and their partners, family, friends and supporters to respond as well. And this is very much the James Lind Alliance approach. It's a collaborative project, and together we want to find the top 10 priorities.
Okay, so thanks, Jenny. So just to sort of finish up, really, we are really keen to hear as many voices as possible, and so that all of those voices can come forward to really be part of this whole project process. The second survey is going to build on the findings of the first survey, so it's really important, and we just want to sort of stress that if you have something important that you really want to be considered as part of this piece of work, you need to use this first survey as the sort of opportunity for you to share that. So perhaps there's something in clinical practice that you think, oh, I wish we knew more about that, or perhaps something from your own experience of interacting with maternity services. This is your opportunity to get that sort of that idea heard. So thank you so much for listening to us. Please do get in contact on our email, researchpriorities@rcm.org.uk. If you've got anything you'd like to sort of share with us or talk with us about the project, we'd be really keen to hear from you. Have a good rest of your evening.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. So that's going to be everyone's homework for tonight, to have a go at doing the survey, and I'll put myself in there because I haven't done it myself yet either. So we've got lots of homework to get our priorities in. Really important to get the midwife voice in here, as well as women and families, obviously. Okay, we're on to the main event now, and I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderful Alys Einion, who's going to be sharing with us anti-oppressive practice in midwifery and maternity services. And this is at a time when racism has been demonstrated very explicitly in the media, especially in the UK at the moment. And yet some people who kind of you wouldn't expect have talked about it as being trivia. And now Alys has been spoken to us before, so she's a good friend. And she's a midwife, she's an academic, she's a teacher and a researcher. She's an associate professor and editor-in-chief for the Practising Midwife journal. So many of you will know her by name and by her face because she's around a lot. She's also the founder of Centered Birth Hypnotherapy. As a hypnotherapist, she's a complementary therapist and activist for gender equality. She's also, in her spare time, a novelist and prolific writer, and she's currently engaged in research on inclusive midwifery practice and education and decolonization of midwifery. So welcome, Alys. The screen is now yours. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you.
You just have to go the lovely IT. Wonderful.
Yes, I'm getting there. And oh dear. I just need to get to my screen bit.
Gosh.
Sorry, everybody. There we are.
We're itching to hear, Alys. We're itching to hear.
Okay, that should be there now. Yes, it is. Wonderful. Thank you all very much for coming and for listening. Thank you, Sue, for introducing me so nicely and kindly. My name is Alys Einion, and I am currently working at the University of Dundee, which is wonderful. I love it there. And I'm really excited to talk about this because this is a topic I'm really, really passionate about. And I may get a little carried away. One of the things I want to do before I begin is to acknowledge that I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I cannot speak from an insider perspective on many of the issues around anti-oppressive practice, but I do have some insider knowledge for some issues. So I just want to acknowledge that an awful lot of what I've included in today's presentation comes from the work of other people who've stood up, spoken up, and made changes to try and improve the provision of midwifery care and maternity services. And I'm just a voice. What matters is that we get going with this conversation. And that's really where I'm coming from. So we can see anti-oppressive practice is something that's both a theory and an approach. And I think that's something we can all get our heads around. There's a whole theory and body of research around anti-oppressive practice anyway, but it's also an approach. It's an active entity that's got a lot of scope, and it covers any and all forms of inequity and power. So often in our services and in our spaces, we talk about things like equality, diversity, inclusion. We talk about inclusive practices, but this is all about any form of unbalance where some people have more power than others. And it is an approach to social issues and to people's lived experience, which looks on at how larger systems create and protect unearned privilege and power that some groups have because of our societies, because of our histories. And that at the same time creates, maintains, and upholds difficult and inequitable conditions for other groups of people. So we know that we don't want there to be any inequity, but there is. It's clear there is, and we need to think about how to address it. Because the inequitable conditions that are created by the systems that we live in, the systems we practice in, the systems that people experience midwifery care and maternity care in, they lead to power imbalances between the people who have certain types of privilege and the people who don't, or the people who are marginalized versus the people who tend to be centralized by the kind of services we provide. So what we do in anti-oppressive practice is to center the experience of equity deserving groups and identities so that we can build structures and systems that work for everyone. And although this seems quite weighty and it's quite theory heavy and it seems very important, it actually is something we all have the power to engage in. So just as a bit of background on what we mean by oppression, I found a wonderful resource that helps to actually look at the way oppression works in our society. And this model is a really good way of understanding why it is we need anti-oppressive practice, because it looks at the three interacting levels of oppression within our society. There's structural, there's cultural, and then there's personal. So as you can see, the structural type of oppression is when entities and organizations who are responsible for distributing resources and delegating power in society actually create conditions of inequity. And that there's examples there of what kind of entities and organizations we're talking about. And as you can see there, this includes education systems and healthcare systems, which are our business as midwives. Then there's cultural oppression, and this is about language and categorization, the way we label things, the way we design things even, that contribute to oppression by influencing our cultural values and creating structures that label groups of people as either dominant or other. And that then leads to further inequality and inequity. So examples of that are white versus racial minority. And I know the language around how to describe people of diverse ethnic backgrounds is changing. So I would prefer to say minoritized ethnic groups, but in this source, they use this term. There are things such as heteronormative versus non-heteronormative systems and languages, neurotypical versus neurodivergent. These are just some examples. And then at the personal level, oppression is about individual interactions, everyday work practices, and the values we hold and may share with others. And this could be, for example, discrimination against a person based on prejudicial thoughts, microaggressions enacted against people. But we do know that when we look at this, each of these feeds into the other. But the place where we have power is in this personal domain. And that personal domain can bring about and help to bring about change in the other domains. But obviously the other domains change far more slowly. Now, it's really relevant for us as midwives because our heritage is grounded in supporting people, and often the people who've been historically oppressed and marginalized. So women, minoritized Black and ethnic women and parents, women who are poorer, immigrant women, disabled, neurodiverse, people of diverse gender and sexuality are all part of our history. But we are an oppressed profession as well. Now, this may be an unfashionable topic in midwifery, but we are bound up in the emancipation of women and of other oppressed people. And we are also bound up in our own professionalization, and it's a very female occupation. So we need to look at this insider stance on midwifery as it's understood within our dominant Western global North Eurocentric model. Those of us who are enculturated in that system, which is born from these colonial, patriarchal and capitalist structures, the ones that really do have multiple impacts on people who bear children and the people who attend them, we can undo our legacy of oppression and injustice and make the changes that are needed to ensure midwifery grows beyond its history, its regulation and its limitations, so that we are aligned with and centered on unconditional and respectful care of women and birthing people. And this is why I'm so driven to do this, because I really feel that we have so much that we bring to bear in midwifery, and so much power to rather than power over. But sometimes people don't feel confident to challenge oppressive structures and conditions. Part of this comes from our heritage because we have been oppressed, and this is partly because we were demonized in the past. And that legacy has carried over to now, a defensive legacy that was, we were actively characterized by the establishment, by those powerful structures as dirty, ignorant, and incompetent. We've been fighting against that. We have established midwifery as a research-led, holistic profession of specialists, but we remain feminized in a landscape that's patriarchal, feminized and therefore placed in a position where we are considered less than. Often when we've got positive narratives, the midwife trope is similar to that of the nurse as an angel of mercy, as if it's something that we do because we're women, when actually what we have is really powerful expertise. So I'm coming to this with a sense of moral obligation and justice. I've got this privilege, but I want to use it to change the context in which we provide care and support women and parents and each other. And I want you to come along on that journey with me. Is oppression really an issue? I can hear you asking. It is, because the systems that we work in legitimize medical staff's power over women during childbirth. This relates to some other challenges, the manifestation of gender stereotypes, where women and midwives are expected to adhere to stereotypical norms of femininity, such as submissiveness, not something I've ever been able to adhere to, by the way. And this expectation and the manifestation of these stereotypes can lead to shame, and midwives are also prone to feeling this shame. So there's this good mother trope that we're supposed to behave in certain ways, and this restricts mothers when they enter into maternity care and restricts midwives. And certain groups, people, identities are more likely to experience the oppression of that restriction. We are guilty of our own forms of oppression as midwives, and I own that, because we practice within cultures that too often marginalize, other, or exclude, often through subtle microaggressions, people who do not follow some kind of indefinable cultural norm. And if anybody can actually define those norms for me, I would really welcome that, because I'm still trying to figure them out. It applies to ourselves in our professional spaces and workplaces. We have ingrained cultures, and we know that those cultures need to grow and change and evolve to become more supportive for us, for student midwives, for our colleagues, and for the women we care for. And that's really important, I believe, because I also know and believe that action to change is happening all over the country and all over the world. But I also believe that much more can be done, and that it begins and ends with us, because we're all complicit in the system, and there is no judgment here. There is nothing other than recognizing the power of the system and what we have to do to function within it. But we still do have the power to change our profession and practice for the better. We saw in the video we just watched how the RCM in the UK are looking at research priorities, because they're invested in the evolution of our profession as something that can actively change the maternity care landscape. But I sometimes feel, actually I quite often feel, that we don't feel empowered to do that for ourselves and for the environments that we work in and for our colleagues and the women we work with. We do need to acknowledge our own privilege, and we need to understand its impact. And we must accept that cultures of oppression cannot be allowed to continue. So what is anti-oppressive practice in the context of midwifery, and how can we practice it? To begin with, and I think this is important, because providing you with some practical tools is one thing, saying there's oppression. Another thing is say, well, what can we do? We need to feel able to do things. So let's start with becoming conscious of and taking responsibility for our knowledge, our perspectives, and our ways of seeing the world, recognizing how we see the world, and then following up on our need to truly learn to see through the eyes of others, to be able to actively set aside the filters and the assumptions and the histories of our perceptions, and trying to see the world as others see it. We all have assumptions and bias, and these are cognitive shortcuts that we all have that enable our brains to categorize objects and assign them a status as safe or not safe. Bias tends to be much more personal, but our assumptions are largely based in group thinking and group shared norms. So one of the things we can start to do, and it is a daily practice, and it's not something you ever fully achieve because it keeps having to grow and learn, is to try and move beyond this, because we do have that capacity. So we can actively develop our awareness of multiple perspectives on our profession, our role, our behaviours, and how we can respect others in their uniqueness, just as we respect ourselves. And there's a lot we can do to try and think, well, what do I not know in this context? I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, but I don't always know what I don't know. So there's work to be done having conversations with people, frank conversations about how they are experiencing midwifery as colleagues, as service users. And one of the things I've said for many years in my practice is never assume anything, except an occasional air of intelligence. We can work by challenging our own assumptions and recognizing when they happen. Because advocacy, which is what we really need to do in anti-oppressive practice, has always been part of our role, but without self-awareness, it's an empty term. And challenging our own assumptions is really difficult, but it's a really good thing to do when we want to recognize oppression, our own and others. And one of the things we can do is not accept a status differential between us and others, because the medical hierarchy is not fixed or inevitable. We're all the same. We're all on the same level. It takes a bit of work to do that. It takes a bit of work to establish a landscape in which we're all equal on the same level. We're all seeing each other and regarding each other with the same degree of respect, because we are in those structures and hierarchies. It's about learning to see people as people. It's about a mindfulness where we enter into a situation with a person and see them as a person first, and it takes mental practice. It's a mental habit. We see them as who and what they are at the time they come to us. And while we're doing that, start to recognize the filters and other influences that can affect our perception of them. It is not always easy to see what our own filters and assumptions are, but we're perfectly capable of learning each other's histories on our own. And I think taking time to know people as they are and as they present themselves to us gives us a chance to better understand the lived experience of the now for us and for them, for all of us. And that's grounded in diversity, because we're all different. We may have many things in common. We're all different, and in subjectivity, and we can celebrate that. There's so much to learn from each other. It just sometimes feels like hard work, because we have to have hard conversations with other people and with ourselves, and sometimes face hard truth. So it's listening to and respecting others' lived experiences. And that helps us develop this awareness of each other and our biases and our preconceptions, and allow us to move beyond them, and to not be afraid to be challenged, and not be afraid to be uncomfortable while we're learning each other, to discover, oh, actually, I've just said something that was not good or was experienced by someone else as uncomfortable. To own that and to take responsibility for that is quite hard. And I've blushed with shame so many times in conversations, because I've realized I've made a complete faux pas, or I've not realized where someone else is coming from. But it's about accepting that and moving through it to create this shared landscape. But it's a challenge, because gender, race, class, and other stereotypes and expectations are so deeply entrenched in our cultures, and they are so powerfully presented and represented again and again in so many social spaces as the norm. So becoming anti-oppressive is quite difficult. So I'm lucky, because so many people have written about this, but reproductive oppression is based in the systems of power that are invested in control of our reproductive freedoms. And I know this is political, but it's true. And this is particularly important for multiply marginalized groups. We cannot just see people as one characteristic or one bit of oppression. Actually, people are intersectional, and they can be experiencing oppression from many different angles and for many different reasons. So some of the literature that we have has shown links between obstetric violence and obstetric racism. And an example of this is diagnostic lapse, where racist assumptions lead to inappropriate diagnosis, to neglect, to dismissively or disrespectful care, or failure to properly manage pain. So in their example, this is in Black people. also they can result in coercion and humiliation and shaming of Black people. And I'm focusing on racism in this presentation because it is one of the most evident challenges of midwifery at the moment. There are multiple forms of oppression in our midwifery spaces, but racism has really come to the fore. And we can see that medical racism is one of the root causes of the inequalities in outcomes between Black and white women. So we need to challenge this. This does need to change. We know it exists. The literature shows us. When we think about this, some of the literature is quite shocking, and this is where you may feel uncomfortable, and I certainly did when I was researching this topic. The use of medical intimidation to control the behaviour of labouring people is an explicit strategy found in hospitals where hierarchy determines who has the power to make decisions over medical care. And for some people, and this is research that was based in America, but it does have relevance for us, they fear entering into maternity services. They fear this state-sanctioned racial violence as part of their experience and the power of the system to intervene and to threaten them with, for example, the removal of their children. And I know in the UK, we do have similar experiences. Another feature is isolation. So we need to recognize how systemic racism and other forms of oppression infiltrate and undermine maternity care in particular. So what I want to say to you is something I've always said to my students and colleagues, that regardless of any of our identities, protected characteristics, or anyone else's, we should be practicing unconditional positive regard. This was one of the most powerful lessons I was taught in my midwifery education a very long time ago. I won't say how long, by somebody I respected so much. And we can learn to practice unconditional positive regard, caring for people as they are, respecting them as they are, and looking at what we have to offer them at any given point in their childbearing journey, because we are offering and they are taking from us what they need. And that stops it being about power. We can provide humanistic care because where there is diversity, we can work respectfully, and we can have a healthy curiosity that enables us to integrate different knowledges and viewpoints into our vision. Scientific rationalism is brilliant. Science, evidence-based practice, research gives us lots of ways of addressing aspects of reproductive biology, health determinant, interventions and care that are value to mothers in their pregnancy and perinatal journeys. But we need to provide care that is humanistic, that respects individuality and autonomy. And in this, focus on how to bring about change. We can't hold individuals accountable for systemic abuse, but we have to hold them accountable for their individual behaviours and for not resisting this. We can't change our institutions until we change our culture. So we have to, unfortunately, but fortunately, make visible the problematic aspects of any culture that leads to institutional dominance and to the oppression of peoples, persons, and cultures. We all have something in common somewhere, and where there's commonality, we can all find a shared voice. And that's something we need to remember, is that we're not the lone voice in the wilderness. We're not the tall poppy leaning up above the parapet. We are actually many. And as a shared voice, we have power. So we can be allies to anyone, whatever our experiences, whatever our personal or professional history, we can learn to stand beside those who need our strength or our non-judgmental presence. And here is a model, the references on the slide, for becoming an effective ally, because these are the 4 degrees of allyship or non-allyship, moving from apathetic to advocate. And it is a set of actions, or a process of evolution, where we move through our knowledge and understanding of the oppressions and inequities that happen in our practice towards being routinely and proactively advocating for others. We can promote respectful practice using research, using the systems and processes that exist in our hierarchical institutions. We can use research to promote respectful practice and carry out that kind of research. So I've given you an example here from Australia that looked at a practical approach to assessing cultural competence. We can take tools like this and we can use them intersectionally. We can adapt them through dialogue with our communities and through co-production to look at the kinds of privilege, inequity, potential and actual oppression that exists in our own institutions. That then gives us a springboard and an evidence base and a movement and a momentum to address systemic racism and all forms of oppression. We can also be aware of microaggressions. Now, I've put this slide in because I went to a really good presentation with a colleague yesterday who was looking at allyship and another colleague who was discussing microaggressions. And we can actually become aware of these and challenge them. We can challenge them in ourselves, and we can, when we see them, call them out. So microaggressions are subtle, intentional, or sometimes unintentional interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias towards historically marginalized groups. And they may be labeled as micro, they may be small, appear small things, but they actually can have a huge impact on a person's life. And they can make people feel like they don't belong or they don't want to belong. So one of the things I would say is take a look at what kinds of microaggressions can be experienced by the people in your workplace and your life. We can also be radically honest about this. We have to acknowledge our past and present failings of our systems and the drive and need to change these. We must never, ever minimize the oppressions that are documented, observed, and experienced by women and midwives. So we need to look honestly at the places in which oppression is experienced and by whom, and then take action to counter it. We need to learn actively to be anti-racist, anti-discriminatory, positively inclusive. Everyone has the right to dignity. And it's up to us to help each other to move into that state of radical honesty, and radical honesty is very uncomfortable. So to this end, I offer this suggestion. In any given situation in your role, ask yourself, who is excluded right now? Who might feel left out or feel as if they're not seen or heard? Who is not being considered? Whose needs are not accounted for? Does that BAME colleague or the colleague with a strong accent experience discrimination in practice? Are students overhearing homophobic remarks from staff or patients? Does anyone feel excluded from the team's professional and social activities? Is that planned activity accessible to neurodiverse people or people with caring responsibilities? And the list could go on and on and on. We can ask, as we practice our awareness, how might this person I am with right now be experiencing this situation, given what I know about them and the social and societal forces affecting them? If this mother is affected by homophobia, or that mother by sizeism and weight stigma, or this family by being refugees, or that mother by racial injustice, how can I tailor my care to support them most effectively? What do I need to do to know that? Who needs to be involved? And how can I humbly guide this person to have the best possible experience of childbearing or of their working life, whilst I have the privilege of working with them? So you can be the change, and we harken right back to the old activism, but be the change, be the person who sees the barriers for yourself and others, helps others over around them, or even better, one of the people who helps to remove them. You can challenge language or behavior that needs to be challenged. You can role model respect, evidence it, role model it, and role model inclusive practice. Where oppression exists, get involved, organize, change the script for yourself. You can change your own script, and when you start changing your own script, other people follow. You'd be amazed at the power of just changing the words you use, for example. Other people will follow along. It'll be uncomfortable at first. You might get some funny looks. I certainly have. But it actually does work. And we can then together nurture this shared recognition of why it's so important and evidence the change that we need to make in the world. I want to also include a word on fear, because I know that medicalized maternity care would have you working like machines, speeding patients along the conveyor belt, never having a real moment to humanly connect and share that experience. It would have you too afraid to speak up for fear of risk to yourself and your own career. Well, as another colleague once said to me, action cures fear. Remember, the legislative framework that underpins our practice, the code, requires us to practice in an inclusive, anti-oppressive manner. So if you're working according to the code and you're working according to the law, you are unassailable. And if you're using evidence to support your action, you're doing what is required of you as a midwife. There is no reason why you should suffer for standing up for what is right. We are all walking histories, and we're roadmaps of every prejudice or assumption that closed off or changed our route through life or affected how easy or difficult our path might be. All bodies, all selves are different, yet we're all here together you and I, walking, stumbling, dancing our way forward through this vast and complex terrain of life. So, whatever setting you work with, whoever you work with, however complex needs a mother or family might have, whatever anybody's history, experience, personality, we all belong to humanity. We all deserve proper care, recognition, respect, and belonging. So the final thing I want to say to you is this. If someone tells you they are experiencing any form of oppression, believe them. Believe in them. Act in every way with the only assumption you are allowed to make. The assumption that their experience is true and valid, because it is. I have included a useful resource here from Oxfam on anti-racism, which I found very, very educational. And I have also included my references on my PowerPoint. I want to say thank you to Sue and to all of you for listening.
Fabulous, Alys. Goodness. I think I need you in my pocket. Because as you were talking, and I know people, you can now put some questions or comments into Alys, and we can deal with that. I mean, I was sort of thinking, and I'm feeling a little bit breathless, actually, Alys.
Sorry.
Just a little bit breathless as we scampered through it, because it's a huge, huge topic. And you've given us a lot of food for thought. And I have to say, I've jotted down on my little notebook, it's not our fault for necessarily being oppressors. And I think that can get in the way sometimes, because and I can't remember now that there's a really good 2-minute clip on what privilege means, white privilege means, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it's fantastic, because it's not about the fact if you're white you have a fantastic life necessarily, but you start off with a better life chance and perspective than if you're black and brown, where you might have had other things that have interfered with your life. And I was just sort of thinking about that, and I was thinking as you were talking about linking in with women and families, and I've jotted in here, you need the investment of time and the willingness, I think, to engage in a relationship. And I think maybe sometimes if you're very stressed, you kind of keep yourself a little bit distant, and might that affect how you deal with actually countering oppression? That's my question.
I think it does. I think the conditions in which we work, they don't allow for the space, the time, and the energy to take up this fight as well as everything else. And I think for many midwives, they are doing a brilliant job. They're absolutely doing a brilliant job in promoting health and keeping mothers and babies alive and providing positive experiences for women and families. But there's also this, what else are you expecting me to do? And we are very aware of the very real problem of compassion fatigue as well. That midwives are overwhelmed and carry a huge mental and emotional load. So then coming along and saying, and now you need to work on your anti-oppressive practice, seems to be another ask, and maybe an ask too far. But at the same time, I think we recognize that as a group, that is part of our oppression. That is part of our shared oppression, and that the work of anti-oppressive practice can help contribute to changing the systems that oppress us as well as those we care for. Because none of us goes out there to provide bad care, to provide unequal care. We're all invested in doing the absolute best we can. And I am still in awe of every midwife working clinically in really challenging conditions often, and especially with the legacy of COVID that we're all living with. I just feel that sometimes we need to be given permission as well to stand up and say, actually, I am going to question this. I am going to challenge this, and to not feel like we're the only voice. We're not the only one standing up and saying, I am not happy. I've worked recently with some students who were experiencing some discrimination in placement, and all they wanted was for somebody to recognize this exists, and to say to them, what can we do to change that? To demonstrate that they were heard and that change was wanted. There was a volition to improve. It didn't mean that we had to change everything at once, because we can't.
No.
Our institutions are monoliths, and it takes a long time to change the face of a monolith. But we can share and recognize each other's voices and lift each other's voices up, and acknowledge what's happening and say, yes, I recognize it, and we are trying.
And that's lovely. Lift each other up. And I think that's really fantastic. And thank you for that, because I think we're very practical people as midwives, and we want to sort everything out. And for some of you watching this and listening to Alys's words will be thinking, where can I start? Where can I start? And then be thinking, oh, it's just too much. And I think to you have to start somewhere. And even understanding your own biases and stuff is a good starting point. And we have a question from Celine from Quebec.
Hi, Celine.
And she says, any advice to go beyond blame and victim language? Now, that's a good one.
That is a good question, because it's really difficult. It's actually really difficult to move beyond blame and victim language. Some of it is to, when you're having the conversations with people, is to listen very actively to how they phrase things, and you can reframe things in positive language, or in language that is empowering, or creates the conditions for empowerment, because you don't empower others. So we could, not talk about blame, not talk about a victim, but we can talk about experience. We can do that thing of almost like salutogenesis, where we talk about what people are capable of rather than what they've suffered or what they're missing. Listening to what people's needs are and experiences are is one thing, but then say, well, okay, so we're coming from this, and I've recognized what's happening to you, and what's happening to you is valid, and your feelings are valid. And now what can we do? Because I think, yes, the whole blame and victim it creates a negative feeling, and it brings us back to that shame I mentioned. So perhaps it's sitting down and looking at our conversations, the words we're using, and how we're listening to people. And then when we listen to them, how we follow through on our actions, how we follow through on what we are aware of, and what we do with it, and acknowledging that sometimes you can't do anything, or what power you have is limited. But yes, very much change the script by modeling positive language. And there's lots of articles out there in the midwifery space that talk about reframing things, reframing language. And I would recommend that we take a good look at that.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. Now, I think there's another question coming in a minute.
Okay.
I was one. Oh, here we are. Sean Jones. I knew there was something because I could see Paul Tommy. It's a comment. And Sean, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Sean, says challenging oppressive behaviours in care would surely reduce workload in the very long run, as equity of care and equity of access to care would mean a safer care system for families and those who are caring for them.
Absolutely, Sean. Absolutely.
Top of the class.
Yes. But this is the thing. When we look at our practices, we know that over time, midwifery and midwives and doctors and everybody else involved, we've made huge strides in improving experiences, outcomes. We've learned so much, and we keep learning. But we also know that investing in certain things is a long-term commitment, which you don't get immediate results necessarily. You get longer-term gains, and it is improving the quality of the care experience, and addressing practice through anti-oppressive approaches is an investment in better outcomes over time. And not only is that sort of morally and ethically feel good, but it is a money saver. And it will result in better working conditions for all of us. It should. And may in fact help with some of the issues we face as a profession, like staffing, attrition, and so on. So, it's kind of a win-win, but there's still an awful lot we all need to learn.
Yeah, because of course it's not just as you were talking, it wasn't just the women and families we're caring for and the babies, but it's also our colleagues.
Yes. Because
we might be in a service where there is microaggression, for example, or racism going on right in front of us, which maybe is so every day we haven't noticed.
Yes.
I mean, and how do you deal with that if you suddenly think, hang on, and especially some people will go to work tomorrow and be looking out for it and think, oh, hang on, that's not right.
So the
How
first thing,
is you're the one person that you
Mm.
feel?
So what the thing to do is to go back to the allyship, is to stand next to that person, or to speak to that person and say, hi, how are you? And, I noticed this. Is there anything, the person who's experiencing, not the person who's necessarily giving it out, or
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say to, so something I learned yesterday again was to say to the person you feel is behaving in this manner, is to say to them, oh, do you just return to that and repeat that again? I'm not sure I understood you. I'm not just understood your meaning, and get them to explain it. Because when you ask somebody to explain something, it's a lot easier than asking them, saying to them, oh, actually, I thought you were being racist then.
Yeah,
It can often be a good way in to get people to discuss things. And then from that, explore a bit further as to what you think is happening. Obviously, when it comes to things that do affect people negatively, service users or staff, every organization has reporting mechanisms and support, and you can always follow that line. But if you are observing somebody who is being marginalized or oppressed, stand beside them, enter into their space, offer your presence, ask nice, sensitive questions, offer them a cup of tea or whatever is right in that moment, but recognize what they're going through, and give them the chance to feel like they're not alone.
That's a nice piece of work. Okay, thank you for that. Now we've got Nessa Mohammadi. Hi, Nessa, or Nisa. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And she says, can body language also help us in reducing this concern?
Yes. When we think about how much communication is body language, I think you can often tell when someone is feeling uncomfortable from their body language. And you can also open up your space and give the kind of positive, accepting body language that works with people. But you have to do it on an individual basis, because people's body language is different. There's different cultural aspects of body language. And, even entering into somebody's personal space, it can differ by culture. Something I've learned a few times when I've worked with different people, and discovered that my perception of personal space and body language is not the same. But I think it can. And I don't think sometimes you need to say things. I think you can demonstrate your presence and your attention by your body language, and by your gestures, your mannerisms, and your face that is paying attention. You're demonstrating attention. And I think as well, we're all compassionate, caring, loving midwives. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say, I really care that this is happening to you. I really care about this at the moment. I'm here for you. Don't make it all about us and our feelings, but I actually do care. This matters to me. So, rather than, we're not automatons, are we? We're humans. And sometimes it's about being a human being, not a human doing.
Now that's lovely, because we're very much of being with women, aren't we? So that's a really nice way of putting it. Thank you, Alys. I mean, that's and something we can all do in quite in a way. It sounds very simple, and it's not simple, but the sort of the being with someone and standing with them, being with them, that's really great. Thank you very much for that. Now, because I've got, and I had the other query I had, and I love the Scammell model, because that really put the personal, and I like the fact that we can impact on the whole organization. And it's a bit like knowledge. It takes a long time to get to that point, but we can do it. And I think that was very positive. But the other thing I had a query was about microaggression. How can you give an example of microaggression you might see day to day, just to illustrate?
Okay, so one that's very pertinent at the moment, because it's Ramadan, would be not being aware of the impact on a Muslim colleague if you are having an event where there's food and alcohol being served. Alcohol at any time for a Muslim, but food as well in Ramadan, to say, oh, come along, and there's a big spread of food. Now, most of the Muslim colleagues I have are like, yeah, it doesn't bother me, I'm good. But even so, it could make people feel uncomfortable. And that kind of thing if people are disregarding or actually actively saying, well, yeah, but there, it's only 2 people, so the rest of us are going to eat. It's not saying that we wouldn't eat, but it's about being sensitive to, well, how would someone else experience this? From their perspective, what would this look like? From our perspective, it looks like a lovely social gathering and we're enjoying the cake. What does it look like from their perspective? Because they may be experiencing that. It could be comments on someone's appearance that we don't even realize are microaggressions. It could be, and part of our culture that we don't realize can be experienced as oppression by other people, that we might think, oh, I'm just having a conversation, but we don't realize. So for example, another example is the you go to have lunch with your colleagues and all they talk about is their diet. They're going on a diet, and you're sitting there eating your lovely lunch thinking, oh, should I be eating this? And it's a minor thing, but sometimes some people will experience it as, I don't want to have lunch with these people anymore. And then they become excluded socially. So I'm not making a big deal out of it, but it's often stuff we aren't aware of that could be interpreted in that way, which is why I say, try and think, how would someone else experience this who doesn't have the same mindset as you, the same set of experiences, etc.
That's perfect, Alys. Perfect. Now, I've just got another now. It's a comment, and I think it's I always say to everybody, this hour is the fastest hour in the week, and it really has been. It's swung by. I feel a bit breathless, and my brain is churning over, and I'm probably going to be thinking, I probably have to watch, and how fantastic you'll have this presentation to watch again, just to go through it again, which is fantastic. Celine again, you've made another comment. She says, wow, full of hope. I'm thinking about permaculture principles, regeneration energy for the planet. Celine, that's lovely. And thank you very much for being the person who's given us the last word this evening for now. And thank you so much, Alys, for sharing your knowledge and perspectives and some lovely examples, and just giving us a little kick about this to really think about how we can do this in a small way at first, maybe, and then getting more and more, so we can move ourselves towards being truly anti-oppressive. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to say also thank you to Angelo, who's behind all of this production, and he'll be busily editing this for tomorrow to be accessible to you all. And also for those of you who want the podcasts at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, that'll be done. So thank you to Angelo for that, and Paul, who's been looking after all the questions this evening and all series so far. This is why I'm going over there, because it's my other screen with the questions on. Now, don't forget, we've got the All Ireland Festival in Dublin on the 9th of April. So don't forget to book for that if you want to go to Dublin, or if you just want to opt in for the box set. Fantastic. And also the Midlands Festival on the 14th of May. Now the programme's out, it looks good, so look out for that. Also, if you are doing some work at the moment, you've got some lovely project, or you've got some words of wisdom like Alys to share with people and your own midwives and student midwives, we're also doing a call out for papers for the Manchester Festival, which is in June, 18th of June. I think I'm just checking. Yes, 18th of June. I have to check with all my bits and notes myself. So look out for the call for that, and send us some information if that's what you'd like to do. And in the meantime, we're having a little break. We're going to be back on the 17th of April, and we've got a fantastic programme. I'm not going to even tell you what's in it, but there's lots of really delicious things for you in the next series through April through to July, early July. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Thank you for joining us, and take care of yourselves even better. Take care. Bye.